Since 2011, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, 13 states, have passed more restrictive voter identification laws. 11 of those are slated to be in effect in 2014. Proponents of these laws, who are almost exclusively Republicans, say voter ID laws are necessary to prevent voter fraud, and they maintain that in-person voter fraud is a serious problem that needs to be addressed.
Voter fraud is widespread, and it's very real.
We do have voter fraud here that needs to be shut down.
To deny that voter fraud isn't going on is to frankly deny reality.
Down in Alabama, where they're allegedly selling votes for $20, $40 and for crack cocaine.
Democrats, including Attorney General Eric Holder, say that voter ID laws disenfranchise poor and minority voters who are less likely to have ID, and many allege that Republicans are using voter ID laws for political gain, a perception fueled by this comment from Pennsylvania House GOP leader Mike Turzai in 2012.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania, done.
That Pennsylvania voter ID law was ultimately struck down in the courts, but the basic question at the heart of this debate is this: is the cost of voter ID laws in terms of voter disenfranchisement worth the benefit those laws provide in terms of preventing actual fraud? Well, Professor Justin Levitt has been tracking instances of voter impersonation at the polls, the sort of voter fraud these ID laws actually combat. And here's what his comprehensive investigation found. Going back to the year 2000, among more than 1 billion votes cast, Levitt could find just 31 incidents of a voter pretending to be someone else at the polls. 31, that is it. Meanwhile, in just a handful of states, thousands of voters, have actually, in real life, been turned away at the polls for lacking ID. Joining me now is Justin Levitt, law professor at Loyola Law School. Justin, it's good to have you here.
Thanks very much, Ezra.
So to what degree are these laws solving a fake problem by creating a real one?
Yeah, they seem to be targeting something that is vanishingly rare. And what they're doing in the process is not that meaningful to a lot of Americans, and very, very meaningful indeed to a significant number. That is, the most restrictive laws, the harshest ID laws, say that you can't vote a valid ballot unless you've got the right particular type of document. And though most people have things like a driver's license or a passport, many don't. And those are many eligible American citizens who aren't able to participate in American democracy. I think that's wrong. It'd be one thing if the benefits of these laws were actually worth that cost. But from everything that anyone's found, and I'm joining a pretty illustrious group here, the benefits just aren't there.
So, and I think this is really important because we played clips of people saying voter fraud is real, and it's important to say voter fraud is real. And it happens in absentee ballots. There are different ways it happens. It just isn't identity impersonation fraud, which is what voter ID laws do. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like this kind of rhetorical sleight of hand is really important to this debate.
Yeah, and you're right. It is rhetorical sleight of hand is exactly right. They're saying, oh, we see you have a cold, which is real, so we have to amputate your arm. The one isn't related to the other. Voter fraud, it's important to acknowledge, does happen. And to the extent that it happens, it should be rooted out. And I think there's universal agreement about that. There's also pretty universal agreement that when it happens, it's fraud in the absentee system, it's voter coercion, it's, as you heard in one of the clips you played before, it's selling votes, it's old-fashioned ballot box stuffing by insiders. And the common link among all those frauds and a lot of other instances is that not one of those things is stopped by demanding that people show a particular type of document at the polls. Those ID requirements at the polls are really designed to stop only one thing, and that's somebody showing up and pretending to be somebody else, which is a really stupid way of stealing an election, which is why it very rarely happens.
So there's one argument that courts have made that the upside of these voter ID laws, even if they don't do anything to actually protect elections, is they make people feel more confident about elections, and that itself is good enough. What has your research found on that?
If that were true, that would at least be something. I don't know that we want to let perceptions drive reality. I mean, for all the people who might feel more confident, there are real people being shut out. But earlier in your show, you were talking about some security theater in another context, and here, the real research on this security theater, even if it doesn't do anything, does it make me feel better, is that it turns out it has very little measurable impact at all. Very careful research done by Nate Persley and Stephen Salabaher, researchers publishing in the Harvard Law Review, found they looked at nationwide studies of people's confidence in the integrity of elections. And they found it really doesn't matter whether you live in a state that has a really harsh ID law or that has a very permissive one. There's no relationship between the laws and how you feel about fraud in the elections. What really matters whether you think an election has integrity is whether your guy won or not.
Justin Levitt from Loyola Law School, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Ezra.